Drive podcast.
All right. We made it through another week. We just one more day to go, and it will be Friday. This is episode 205. This is your boy, East Coast Trev, and I'm joined by my good buddy, Mr. Madman Mardick.
What up?
What up, buddy?
How you doing?
Just, same old, as you guys will all know. We actually, I recorded this driving home from work. Just because it's just that time of year, man. It's just thinking deer and killing fish, bro. I mean, it's just the way it goes.
Thanks for taking the drive with us tonight.
Yeah, I know.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, as I'm side-swiping cars trying to make sure the audio is correct. But it is what it is, right?
It is what it is.
Just getting closer to deer season, man. That's all that matters to me.
Dude. I'm fired up after recording this episode.
I know, dude. We had Greg on, and Greg is just a phenomenal, just all-around great outdoorsman, dude. Just lives, breathes, and dreams it. The passionate part of it, with the turkey hunting, the deer hunting, the trapping, he's just full outdoors like the rest of us. We called seasoned outdoorsman because it's just no matter what the season is, you're outdoors and you're just doing it. So it's nothing better than that. Greg's just a killer dude. And it's a killer podcast. I mean, you want to talk about public land hunting and strategizing and killing big deer. I mean, some of these, it's just the tips and tricks that come out of this man's mouth is just, it's next to none. Next to none. You're not going to get better information anywhere, in my opinion. You're really not.
I know you couldn't see me because you were too busy driving, but most of the podcast while Greg's talking, I'm just sitting here with a shitty grin on my face, just soaking up everything that comes out of that man's mouth.
Yeah. I mean, his articles alone in Peterson Bow Hunting and all the other places that he writes for and everything else, I mean, he's been doing it for years. I mean, he's just a wealth of knowledge. He really honestly is a wealth of knowledge.
And the best thing about Greg is it seems like no matter what question you ask him, he has obviously a valid answer for it, but he's got a story that goes along with it. Real life experience. He's not regurgitating something he heard somewhere else or read somewhere else. Like, he knows the answer or he has his opinion on the answer because he's experienced it in real life probably more than once, and he can tell you the story to back up, his opinion.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, which is super. I mean, 30-something years mobile hunting. Of course. I mean, like, where are you at? It's just, it's the way it goes. Well, let's do some house cleaning, man. Let's clean up the corners. Let's say thank you to our sponsors. We can do the news, and we can get Greg on the phone. What do you think, man?
Let's get it popping.
All right, let's go. First and foremost, we are brought to you and presented by Huntworth, huntworthgear.com. Get more for less with Huntworth. The best camo on the market, hands down. Late season, early season, it doesn't really matter. They have some of the best clothing. I wear their t-shirt almost every day. Their hat is on my head as we speak. Like, I wear their stuff, and I wear it out. Nor'easter Game Calls, nor'eastergamecalls.com, Mr. Mark Buzzle. Guys, I can't say this and stress this enough. If you have not ordered your grunt tube, it is the best grunt tube on the market. It'll blow any extinguisher out of the market. It's the best of the best. I mean, it's hand custom made, every single one of them, from the reeds to the body to the tube, everything 100% the best grunt tube on the market, with a lot of other turkey calls and crow calls. I mean, he sells everything at nor'eastergamecalls.com. If you guys aren't ready to buy it online, but you're going to be in the local area, we will be in Huntstock. There is a booth up there. After Huntstock, I can almost ensure you that 90% of the grunt tubes will be gone. They will not make it through the weekend, so now is the time to order them. And with them being so hard to make, you might want to do it now because you might miss out on it. I promise you that. Also, Bowhunters United, bowhuntersunited.com. Oh, hold on. We got to do Latitude Outdoors because then we can go into the thing. So, all right, Latitude Outdoors, latitudeoutdoors.com. You guys can use promo code Outdoor Drive on that one. Save yourself 10 or 15%. I can't really remember. Latitude Outdoors also has the carbon sticks. They are shipping now. The saddles. There's a ton of great mobile hunting gear over there. Now's the time to get that stuff, get working with it, do all the things you need to do, build your climb, fill your backpack, so on and so forth, and get ready for this season. And last but not least, once again, Bowhunters United, bowhuntersunited.com. They are the official sponsor of News for Your Cruise with our good buddy, Mr. Mike Salter. Let's turn it on over to him, and let's get some news in the world.
All right, guys, why don't we buckle up and see what's going on in the world of news with Mr. Mike Salter.
Hey everyone, a lot of good news this week. Start this one off in Wisconsin, where the DNR is offering a unique hunting opportunity this fall at the Sandhill Wildlife Area in Babcock to help with researching on deer density. The special permit archery hunt will be held on September 30th and October 1st, and applications are due by August 14th. This is a great opportunity, as the last archery hunt in this area was in 1968. The hunt is open to all licensed hunters and is restricted to archery equipment, including crossbows. Successful applicants will be required to review the special hunting rules and regulations for Sandhill before that hunt. Hunters will be issued 2 harvest tags, one either sex and one antlerless, which are only valid at Sandhill during the 2-day hunt. Successful applicants will be notified a week after the application period ends. Unsuccessful applicants will not be notified. And for more information, you can go to the Sandhill Wildlife Area's Outdoor Skills webpage. Now to Ohio, where the DNR announced it is holding special deer hunts in 9 state preserves. Special gun hunts will be held at Bach Hollow and Stages Pond preserves. Both archery and gun hunts on Lake Catherine State Natural Preserves. Archery hunts on Cedar Creek, Davy Woods, Gallagher Fen, Gold Woods, Haviston Woods, and Lawrence Woods. Before hunters can participate, they must attend a mandatory meeting on each hunt. Once completed, the hunters can purchase a $5 ticket to be entered into the special hunt drawing. After the drawing, successful hunters will be asked to stay for a pre-hunt orientation. Hunters will be required to have a valid 2023-24 hunting license, and hunters interested in both the Lake Catherine gun and archery hunts will need to purchase separate lottery tickets for each. Now to Minnesota, where the DNR has announced that 200 acres of the Walnut Lake WMA in Faribault County will be open to hunting for the first time in 75 years. The parcel was closed and designated a wildlife sanctuary to help protect Canadian geese, but the DNR says goose populations recovered long ago, and the sanctuary is no longer justified, and the no trespass wildlife sanctuary designation will be removed. Now to Iowa, where the DNR is offering a program to teach skills needed to hunt, field dress, and cook waterfowl to youth who have little or no waterfowl hunting experience. The event will be held on August 26th at the Olafson Shooting Range near Polk City. Participants will learn basic hunting strategies such as proper equipment, where to hunt, safe shooting practices, and how to field dress, butcher, and cook ducks and geese. The course runs from 2 to 7 p.m. and is for those 8 years and older. The cost is $20, which includes a meal and youth membership to Delta Waterfowl. To register, go to the DNR's events page and search for Youth Learn to Hunt Waterfowl. Now to Oklahoma, where 38 youth deer hunters aged 12 to 17 who have harvested no more than 1 deer will have an opportunity to participate in one of 6 deer hunts on private land. To apply for a hunt, youth applicants must create and or log into their own Go Outdoors Oklahoma license account, select controlled hunts, and apply by August 13th with the following information: the accompanying adult's first and last name, the accompanying adult's phone number and email address, and a list of the hunts in the order of preference that they want. Applicants will receive an email on or before August 24th on their results. Lastly, the U.S. Senate has unanimously passed the Duck Stamp Modernization Act, which makes the federal duck stamp more accessible for waterfowl hunters by authorizing the electronic stamp throughout the entire waterfowl hunting season. Physical stamps will remain available for purchase from the post office or other retailers. Also, don't forget to click on the Outdoor Drives affiliate link in the episode description to become a member of Bowhunters United today to protect and expand your bow hunting rights. As always, if you have any news to send along to me, be greatly appreciated. Send it to Mike Salter on Facebook or bearded_bowhunter21 on Instagram. With that, enjoy the rest of your ride.
Thank you, Mr. Mike Salter, man. We really appreciate you, buddy. Great news for your cruise, as always, every single week, just keeping it going with Bowhunters United. We can't thank you enough. Well, Steve, we got through the good stuff. Now it's on to the better stuff.
I can't wait to listen to this one again.
I know. We're going to get the notepad out and figure out what's going on, dude.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's get Greg Staggs on the phone, man. Let's talk about mobile hunting, killing big whitetails in this. All right, we're back on the phone with Greg Staggs. What's up, Greg?
How you doing, Trevor?
Good, man. It's been a long time coming. We should have done this 200
It has been.
episodes ago.
It's been a few years since we hooked up at a show, man.
I
Good seeing
know.
you.
I know. I think the last one was the Iowa Deer Classic, but
Yes, it was. It was.
yeah. You just got back from a recent show, didn't you? The Mobile Expo?
I did. I drove all the way up to Kalamazoo, Michigan, man. It was a heck of a haul for us, but it was well worth it, man. The show, the Fueled by the Outdoors team, there's 3 or 4 key guys there that have collaborated to bring the show out, and they did a bang-up job in Kalamazoo, Michigan, man. It was a pretty good-sized show, high vendor turnout, big crowds. I mean, of course, they had Dan Infalt up there from the Michigan area, that was speaking, Garrett Prawl, DIY Sportsman, Sam Ubel, a couple different guys. But, I'm sure that contributed to the crowds a little bit. But, yeah, it was just a lot of vendors in the mobile space, and it was a good time.
Why don't we turn the key, man? Let's get this thing underway. Why don't you tell everybody who you are, where you're from, and a little bit about what you do, Greg?
Yeah, so Greg Staggs grew up in the Boot Heel of Missouri, the little part of Missouri that sticks down into Arkansas. So if you're watching or listening, trying to figure out where this weird Missouri accent comes from, it's more Arkansan than it is Missourian, probably. So first generation person to ever take a college class, let alone end up with a couple degrees. My dad, he introduced me to outdoors rabbit hunting. We killed, I'm not kidding you, Trevor. We killed hundreds, if not thousands, of rabbits growing up. I mean, that was a large part of our meal plan every week was rabbits and squirrels. And we just grew up, I'm not going to say I was poor, but I was certainly rich in experiences. But we subsisted a lot of frog legs and rabbits. And if we could knock down, a duck out of season, it was just whatever we could do to put meat on the table, man. And so that's kind of how I grew up. And then I moved off to college, and I was still struggling because we didn't set aside any money for college. It was kind of a very impromptu decision for me, and I was kind of struggling, getting in debt, taking out student loans and stuff. I'm like, man, what can I do to kind of harken back to my old days of growing up? I'm like, what can I do to put meat on the table that I don't keep putting grocery bills on credit cards and stuff? And one night I was at the sporting goods store in Walmart, man. I picked up a little booklet that talked about seasons and game, what everything, and I came across deer, and we didn't have deer where I grew up, but I bought a used bow and a steel climber from a mail order catalog. Probably paid more in shipping than the thing was worth. And man, I didn't kill a deer for a couple of years, but that got me started. And because we grew up poor, and I didn't know a lot of people, and on top of that, I was an introvert. I never had access to private land. So my whole life, I've been a public land mobile hunter where you walk in, you climb a tree, you come down, you walk out with everything that you took. And I've done that for, it's 33 years now I've been hunting that way. So I learned a lot.
I always thought that you invented mobile hunting in all of your writings and videos and stuff. I almost thought that because you've been around for so long, and it's like all the articles and everything that you've ever wrote. I thought you were just like the starting empire of it,
I was early on, and it was by necessity, right? I mean, like I said, we didn't know anybody who had land. I mean, I'm to the point I still can't afford to buy, because land's so expensive nowadays. I don't know if I'll ever have my own land. So, but the blessing is that there's so much public land out there, and I honestly, I love, if you look around the room off to my left there, there's over 1,000 inches of bone staring back at me, and I'm more proud of that, the fact that I went out there and killed those deer, some 167s, and I've never quite hit the 170, the gross booner on a public land, but that's my goal. But I've got several that are close, and the fact that I went out there and did it on the same land that anybody could have done it, I love that fact. That gives me a lot of pride in what I've done.
Is there? All right, I know this is kind of a crazy loaded question, but like if there is one thing that you do above everybody else to make yourself successful on public land, what would it be?
So that's a great question. Everybody loves to. I love. I talked and introduced my son to Dan Infalt this weekend, right? He kind of came up. He was probably a little bit before me, but we came up together. We started off on some of the same forums on the internet, and then he broke off and started the Hunting Bee, started his own forum after we'd already been on one for a while. And everyone is kind of regurgitating what he's done, and there's other killers out there that you hear the same thing over and over. I'll tell you, I don't know if I know anything different than any of those guys. What sets me apart is my wife and I struggled early on to put myself in a career that gave me very much autonomy and flexibility. And so I probably hunt more than about 99% of bow hunters out there. And so what sets me apart is I grind really, really hard. You'll never hear me say I'm a better hunter than anyone else. Never. If you hear me say that, we probably had a few too many at a bar or something like that. I'm not a better hunter than anybody else, but I will put my intestinal fortitude, my ability to grind, up against anybody. And key point out, you probably saw I killed a pretty decent buck last year with 45 minutes left in the season last year, and I killed him because I was not going to give up until the bell rang. And he stepped out of his bedding area. He came through a tunnel that, I talk about that sometimes. I hunt areas that rabbit dogs would struggle to go through. I mean, that's where I have to get to separate myself from the masses sometimes. And he stepped out of a tunnel, following a couple of does, and literally stood up from the tunnel. And he was, 28 yards in front of me when he kind of fully popped up and stood there, and they turned broadside, and I drilled him. And that was 45 minutes of the season left.
That's crazy. So you grind that whole entire season just to be able to shoot that one deer that you want to hold off for.
Absolutely. People think it's crazy because I've been saying it for 20 years that we put in over 100 sits a year. And I absolutely just love bow hunting that much. And now, am I wore out at the end of the season? Absolutely, I am. We're exhausted. But I do. For 20 plus years, we've been putting over 100 sits. Now, that's not 100 days. I'm going to clarify that because people go, you hunt 100? No. I probably hunt 70, 65, 70 days a year. But somewhere in through there, especially when the rut's going on, we'll put in a morning set and afternoon set, and I count those as two different sets. So we put in over 100 sets a year and a half for, 2 decades.
Yeah, and that's, it's funny. A lot of people will say, like, oh, you're really good at this, or you're really good at that, and it's, no, I just do it all the time, so the success just follows behind. It's the same with fishing or hunting or whatever. If you spend every day doing something continuously, it just makes it look like you're doing very well, but they don't understand the background that comes behind it and doing it constantly all the time. Because there's probably, like yourself, there was 99 sits before the 100th one paid off. But you just kept putting in that time. And I think a lot of the other things that are, that contribute to it and it makes it somebody a successful hunter or be like that ultimate great hunter is just the consistency. Consistently shooting good deer year after year after year. Like, you see the guys that, go out and they get that one big deer, and then that's that train that they run forever. Oh, you remember that one deer at 150 I shot? Well, yeah, but it's been 10 years since you shot that one big deer. Like, let's do it consistently. Or what do you, not even talking down on them, but what can you do differently to make yourself more successful?
And you bring up a good point. I think one of the things that, if you want to look at a tactic or a strategy that I do that works well, is I rarely sit the same tree ever. If I sit a tree, it may be 2 or 3 times, but it's spread out over a whole season, or maybe 40 or 50 sits in between it. And other wildlife management areas, other DNR places where I'm literally, we call it the bounce. We bounce. And we had a running joke for years before I could start taking my kids with me. They would always say, Daddy, where are you going tonight? I'm like, I don't know. Because I've got about an hour drive to where I hunt, and literally I'm thinking and running through options and things as I'm going. I literally leave the driveway, pull out, and I'm on the road, highway. I had no idea where I'm hunting that night. Often. And so I'll just it's whatever mood hits me. I'll be looking at flags on the highway, what wind direction, whatever, seeing which fields are cut. That could be potential food sources where you get the hot dough in or whatever. And so, that's probably, if you want to talk strategy, I rarely sit the same tree. So all just about every buck that's on the wall around here, it was the first time in.
And that's one thing you hear a lot of guys talk about, is that first sit is the freshest, best sit. And that's what makes mobile hunting so great. Like, when you set a stand and you sit that stand for the first time, the first hunt is always, or continually, can be the best hunt that there is.
because
Yeah.
it's the first time there's that scent's not in there. You're not going in there and blowing things out. So I guess that's one of the great things about mobile hunting, right? I mean, because you're
Absolutely. Deer pattern us way quicker than we pattern them, and people fool themselves with all the snake oil and everything else. It's become a multi-million-dollar industry to the facade that we can cover human scent from a deer's nose. I mean, God bless you if you believe that. I'm not going to argue with you any day, but I don't. And the fact that you may go in there and you may not even think you've blown a deer out. I've heard. Well, I'm not even going to mention a name, but I've heard several key people in the industry go, "Well, I haven't been winded in so many years." Well, you may not have had a deer blow at you that hunt, but when you leave, he hits your scent trail at some point, and that's why that first sit is so critical, because that you come back in and also I guarantee your deer sightings are going to go down whether they blew at you or not.
right. So, but do you think that that's a bad thing by going in and doing? Well, obviously you don't, but like going into that spot for the first time, do you think that narrows your chances at shooting a deer? So like if you go into a spot, right, and you don't ever go back to that spot and you go to another spot, but you're still like consistently trying to learn those spots by doing first sits in those spots. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not saying one way or another, but
no, I kind of see. I mean, so what you're probably alluding to is the fact that maybe I'm not getting all the intel I could get by going in there time and time again. Mm-hmm. Possibly is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
and there's probably a lot of truth to that. What I'd prefer to do if I can is maybe do an observation sit from a farther up, a higher on a ridge, or across a field, or depending on the terrain. If I can do that and then move in for the kill on that first set, that's what I'd rather do. Get that intel from afar and then move in and try to get the kill. And then if I don't, I'm probably going to wait. If I love the spot, I'm either at least going to move 30 or 40 yards, and possibly have a different entry trail and exit trail than I did that first time. And so especially if a deer spotted me or picked me off, I'm not sitting that tree again, but I rarely do anyway.
So you're doing what somebody would do. So if we were to put it into, get a different look at it, would be somebody that is on a private land farm and they go in and they do an observation sit, or they have an observation stand waiting for that bedding ground to kick a good buck out of it and then move in on them. Now moving in on, so they say on this wind, this deer came out of here, then you're moving in closer and then you're going to go hunt that. So you're just doing an observation stand pushed back and then working your way into the piece.
I will do that. And then there's times, I mean, especially the last 5 years or so, I've become more cautiously reckless, if you could put those two terms together, where I will go in and it's like it's a one and done thing. I'm either going to kill a big buck that night or not. And 99 times out of 100, it's not, right.
Right.
So I wish it would work out better. This place would be full of pedestal mounts and everything. It's not. So normally it's a knot. I've actually got a certain shirt a buddy made me. We were talking one time. And he says, I don't always hunt big buck beds, but when I do, I don't see squat. And it's actually a shirt that we made up. And because it's true for most of the time, but that's the only way, because these big bucks sometimes aren't getting up and moving 80, 90 yards before it gets dark. Mm-hmm. And so you get on top of them, other than the rut when, they're going to be running and, they smell a doe a mile away or something, they're going to be up and around or cruising. More you can hunt funnels and stuff like that, but that's so hit or miss, And a lot of times where I hunt, this is something that I've come to almost rue, but I'm going to learn how to use it to my advantage. I hunt such public spots, and predominantly, it's the Midwest. You're talking Missouri and Southern Illinois and Western Kentucky and those places like that people just love to come to, right? And they save up their vacation and everything else. They're looking to come there. And I've been hunting that area since October 1st or September 15th or whatever. And I'm waiting. And I used to have this mentality that I'm going to save my best spot until November 1st. And I've kept out of my best areas all year long, waiting on that. And the day I show up to go into my best spot, there's 8 other cars in the parking lot. Mm-hmm. I'm like, crap. And so then I go in there, and there's people that walk in there, and the average hunter pays no attention to entry trails or exit trails or how the wind's blowing over the bed. He may have a good spot where the wind is going to be right for his stand or his wherever he sits, but he's paying no attention to how the wind's blowing over the bedding area as he's walking to it. And it's just, the whole area is ruined. And I've kept that spot for the prime spot. So I'm actually trying to work at getting in and killing the deer before the traffic gets there.
Right.
Goal of mine.
I see that a lot. The opposite kind of, where I have a spot that I know is a killer spot for that first week in November, so I stay out. Yep. But yet somebody else is in there September 15th, opening day. Very low % chance killing there. Conditions aren't right, but it's already trashed way before November even rolls around.
Right. The good part about that, I think it depends on how much time exists, right? I think, there's all kinds of telemetry studies where they put radio collars on the deer and everything, and those deer will just kind of like move around within 100 yards. I mean, they won't take off and booger out of the area, and so they might for a little bit, but I think if enough time goes by, you can get in and do it right. But it's tough, man, either way around.
And so one of the questions that I have for you, then, what do you do this time of year scouting to those spots if you're moving constantly from spot to spot? Like, what makes your scouting different than somebody else that would only have 2 or 3 spots mobily trying to go into a spot and hunt?
Yeah, I want to locate a number of deer. It's probably maybe the thing that'll separate me. We run a few. We've got into where we're running more cameras. For years, I didn't run a single trail camera ever. I mean, we just got into running trail cameras the last few years. And the deer I killed with 45 minutes left in the season, I had him on camera, but it didn't help me kill him. He was a mile away from where I got him on camera. So the only thing I'd say I do different is I want to know where a bunch of targets are. I'm not trying to hone in, and the reason I don't pay a whole lot of attention to where one particular buck is in one area and try to go in and kill that buck necessarily. I mean, I will, but where I hunt primarily and predominantly is a lot of ag country, and that ag country is pretty much flat. It's got CRP right next to a cornfield, and so and maybe a bean field, and they'll hit those beans until the beans start turning yellow in our neck of the woods. And that happens sometime it coincides almost perfectly with the start of the season. So they're almost ready to get off that food source anyway. And then the bigger problem than that is they could bed 20, 30, 40 yards off the food source in any direction. It's just as thick in any direction as it is anywhere. And so you got to be very cautious of where, and that's kind of where sitting back, I actually want to buy a spotting scope, my son and I do, and see if we can, target an entryway all the time and maybe move on something like that. But it's very hard to move in on a target buck in ag country when they're bedding 20, 30 yards off. Sometimes they'll bed right in the middle of the beans. I mean, you'll just see one stand up right there. And you're like, how'd you get on that deer? It's hard. So we'll find a target, a couple of bucks, whatever, from afar. We'll watch with binos out of the car or in a fence row sitting one night with a thermocell at our feet. But we'll find multiple spots. And I want to know where I can bounce to employ it. And it's a hard way to hunt, man. I'm not saying I'm a great hunter. We just got to have a lot of targets that go and grind.
So you're just looking and literally to keep the odds high, hunt a ton of different properties and hunt a ton of deer. And then that, and which is, I mean, that's the mathematical equation to kill a big deer. I mean, if you're around a ton of deer all the time in different places, it's a success. No hands down.
I think you nailed it. I heard one, and I can't recall the name of which speaker it was. It was not Dan or Mario, I don't know. It could have been, but I heard someone say this weekend is like that. It may have been Dan. Too many hunters get married to a deer or to a property or to a site, and they just laser focus on that deer or that tree stand or that property, and they're unwilling to pull back from it. And sometimes it just isn't going to work out with that scenario. And that's where our bounce philosophy is just go. Eventually you're going to surprise one. It's not too different than a blind hog finding a nut. kind of thing. At some point, you're going to bounce into the right area. The key over 33 years of doing this is kind of hone in those areas that you put your odds in your favor when you do bounce.
And you just brought up a very good point, honestly. And I think that there's a lot of things that can add to this is that, cell cameras or cameras in general, which I think that you have the attitude about going to different places and targeting different deer, because the point is that you don't have cell cameras, because a lot of hunters or cameras in general, when a lot of people who see deer on camera, they go, that's my deer, that's my deer. And now they have this mental connection with that deer, and all they want to do is kill that one deer. And then what ends up happening is they now are trying to kill that deer in the spot that they want to kill that deer, not where that deer wants to be killed. And then what ends up happening is they just totally get sucked into that one deer, and they keep doing the same thing constantly over and over and over and over again, and not having the success on it. Where I really like your theory and how you go about doing it, because you don't care. It is what it is. The deer is the deer, and you're gonna just.
You're 100% right. And to that point, Trevor, we almost fell prey. So I told you that for the bulk of our career, we haven't ran trail cameras. In the last 2 or 3, we kind of got into it a little bit. And 2 years ago, we had about 4 or 5 that we were running throughout the season, and it's actually, the story's on my YouTube channel. We picked out, it's called Finding a Booner, and we got lucky enough, and we got a 174 on camera in a scrape. And neat story about that scrape was actually only 50 yards from the highway. I actually hunted him one time, and I had a 21-yard shot to the white line on the highway. And I was right. I mean, I was in the game, because what happened was, here's the point of that story. We hunted that deer for the last month of the season. My son laid eyes on him twice. He actually shot underneath him, and we've never told this story on a podcast, or very few people know this story. My son and I went into a spot that was a little away from him, more of a thicker area, but it was down a half a mile. And that deer showed up, and my son shot right underneath him at 17 yards. It was a 174. That was 2 years ago. My son's 16 now, so it's a 14-year-old. He had a broadside shot at a 174, public land, DIY giant, and just, buck fever took over. I actually heard him grunt the deer. I was sitting about 65 yards away, could not see him. I was hunting a little different thicket, but 65 yards away is how thick it was where we were hunting. I heard him grunt, and I heard the bow go off, and I'm waiting, and about a minute later, a text comes across, says, I just missed he said he thought he was a 165. We found it later. We picked up his sheds. He was 174. But here's the whole thing about that. We picked up his sheds, and we hunted hard. We shed hunted hard for that year. Well, there was a couple other guys that was on that deer, public land. They knew about him. He was a little bit visible, and he was about a 6.5-year-old deer. Well, there was one guy that we were sharing a little bit of information. He was sent a picture to me. I was texting him a picture. And when I found the second shed of that deer, I told him, I said, hey, meet me over here in this area. And I didn't tell him what I had. I was going to let him hold the sheds, because he was hunting the deer hard too. And he goes, hey, man, I think that deer that we've been chasing is dead. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, man, there's a deer laying on the side of the road, just got hit by a car last night. And he goes, I think it's him. And so we drove over there, and we got there, and it was absolutely him. I mean, it's on video. It's on my YouTube channel. I put the mouse right on his pedicles. Well, that's how I knew exactly his inside spread and everything, because I put the sheds on the deer. And it was heartbreaking, man. But here's the lesson of that. If that dude if I hadn't been sharing information and collaborating, if that dude hadn't texted me that deer was dead, we would not have driven over there that day. And pros would have picked him clean or whatever. I would have never known that deer was dead. And the following season, we had all these grand plans of how we were going to target that deer. We would have been hunting a ghost all year long. So thank God that dude told me about it, because you're right. You get married to a deer. What if he's not there? What if somebody killed him? What natural causes? A car hits him. I mean, another reason we love to bounce.
And then now you're not. So you would have spent your whole entire season trying to kill that deer that you
we
don't.
Been wondering what we were doing wrong. Yeah. Like why can't we get on this deer?
Yep.
I had no idea.
And that's part of it, right? I mean, that's part of the public land hunting. Somebody else could have shot the deer. I mean, I had a Similar situation. Well, kind of similar, but we were hunting a public land deer, and we thought we had the Holy Grail. Nobody really knew about it. Somewhat, kind of this, that, or another thing. But then, come to find out with it, there's a ton of people that are actually hunting that deer that we didn't even know.
Yeah.
When that deer got killed, there was intel that came out from so many people, and you're like, oh man. So like, and you can't get married to one deer, because if you do, then this is what happens. You're like, oh, well, now what am I going to do? I spent 2 seasons trying to kill that deer, and that was the only deer I was trying to kill. You know what I'm saying? And then you're like, oh, what do you do now? You know, so that's a tough.
There's way more. You think you're really good at identifying a deer, finding a deer, and strategizing and everything, and you don't realize there's a whole bunch of other people out there on public land doing the exact same thing. Because you're right, Trevor. When that deer got killed, and it was even before we put a video of him on our YouTube channel, there were people. I mean, come out of the woodwork. Like, I ran into a guy in the woods from Louisiana. He's from Louisiana, and this deer. He was like, "Oh, did you know about the deer behind?" You know, and he named a place. And I'm like, "Yeah, that deer's dead now." But he knew about the deer, and he was from, I mean, freaking 1,000 miles away.
Mm-hmm. I mean, look at for example, like when we go to Ohio to hunt, and I shot a guy's target deer, and he met me in the parking lot, and he had done all kinds of research, been trying to kill this deer all year. I'm down there for 2 weeks. I shoot this deer, and this is his target deer. He has all the intel. I walked in the woods. I found a big scrape, you know, a rutting area, big bedding area. These deer come through. I shoot him. You know, it's a big deer. You know, I mean, he was 166 and some change, but this is this kid's #1 deer. If he didn't meet me in the parking lot, he would have never known that deer was dead. Never in a million years. Who am I?
Right.
I'm from 10, 12 hours away.
Never known. The chances of him running across your social media and seeing that deer are slim and none. You're right. He'd been hunting a ghost the rest of the year.
Yeah, you know, you brought up another valid point, is watching those social media pages to see if certain deer have died. Because when I was down in Ohio again, the next following year, I was trying to shoot a deer that we had on camera, and I was in stand. This is wild. I was in stand, you know, hunting out of saddle and this, that, and the other thing, trying to move in on this one deer we had some intel on, so on and so forth, and I was scrolling through Ohio's public land page, and the deer I was after had gotten shot that morning, and he was looking for a taxidermist, and it was that deer that I was trying to hunt. I mean, it's very simple. He's very high and tight. He actually looks like the Seek 1 deer, you know, like the reverse, kind of like that, right. Super crazy. He was in the 150s, but like, I was scrolling through social media and saw it was dead, literally got out of the stand and went home, and then was trying to move on another deer but social media helped me know that, because if I didn't know that, I would have continued to hunt that thing for the whole time that I was there, you know, thinking that deer was still alive.
Right.
So you have to have multiple avenues and multiple target deer, because if you don't, you're not gonna be successful.
Yeah.
You had talked about a scrape and hunting a scrape. Do you run mock scrapes and stuff in the public land, or are you hunting, you know, some regular?
We're starting that. We're starting that. That was actually a scrape that we kind of enhanced, if you will. Okay. We stopped and relieved ourselves in it many times. I took a stick and, you know, just kind of blew it on out even further. I made it trying to make it into a big hub scrape. You know, at least let him think that there was, you know, multiple deer hitting it. And man, we got a lot of pictures of that big buck on that scrape. Unfortunately, there was only one at the edge of daylight, and he always came in from the left, exited the right. That's why I ended up hunting that one time. I was across the highway, 21 yards from the shoulder of the road one time, and we actually found that deer dead 40 yards from that spot that I hunted on the highway, just right down from the highway. So I was on his bedding area, but yeah, that. So that was the big thing. We will enhance scrapes. I actually bought a big, like a 1-inch hemp rope off Amazon. I bought like 30 foot of it. It's actually out sitting. It's been sitting since like February out in the yard, just kind of getting rid of the scent and everything, and becoming more acclimated to nature. I'm probably going to cut it into like 10-foot lengths and then tie it up, and we're kind of going to do the whole Don Higgins mock scrape thing, and we're going to try that. I've got a bunch of buck fever synthetic stuff left over from the last couple of years. And we're going to give it a shot and see. I want to get into a remote area, and we'll probably do a kayak trip on this. I want to kayak into some spots and use water access to really eliminate 90% of the foot travel and try to get into a spot that we can go in and maybe set up some presets, some little trophy line mini sticks or something, and because I've got a bunch of those sitting around, and just be able to maybe pop in on a kayak, pull it ashore, and 10 yards go up that tree. And so we're going to try that this year.
You just brought up another valid point where water access is a huge way to keep that scent. We were talking about scent earlier in the podcast, and one of the questions I was going to ask you was, how do you eliminate on scent? But we ended up keeping on going and whatever else. But you just hit on a serious point on mobile hunting and using water access to then, with the wind going that certain direction, going in 20, 30 yards, using it in a funnel area and jumping right up in a tree.
So you asked me before we even went live, started the podcast, if I still did some writing. I actually wrote I write a monthly column for trophyline.com, Trophyline's website. And this month's column that I actually finished it last week, I interviewed a guy named Jacob Emery, and he's got a YouTube channel called DO3 Outdoors, and he specializes in water access with kayaks. And so I wrote my whole column, was just a conversation between Jacob and me. And Jacob, there's two things that Jacob really utilizes to his advantage in water access. Well, there's the obvious of being able to go in deep where people it's less energy. There's not as much foot traffic because he goes in places where you can't get to as much. But then when you do that, he tries to pull up his kayak and he's identified a tree that he can go 10, 15 yards, maybe sometimes 10, 15 feet and be up in his tree, right? And so he can almost literally look down and see his kayak and he's minimized his ground scent, the ground disturbance. So even if you think you can cover scent, right, with some kind of scent killer stuff or whatever, you're still breaking and you've got ground disturbance, and the deer are going to detect it. There's no way about it. There's too many dog studies and canine handlers out there that have proven that. So the more you can minimize that ground scent, ground disturbance to get up in a tree, the better off you are. And when you're in a kayak, you might be able to get to your kill tree in 10 yards. And then the thermals are going to predominantly pull that scent out over the water. And then the second thing, so that's one that Jacob loves about it. And then the second thing that he highlighted for me was a lot of times water will be around a point where it creates pinch points. It'll be a steep hill on one side, and then there's water, kind of maybe an oxbow or something cutting around, and it's pinching that travel point to where he can get in his tree in 10 foot, but also there's only like a 40-yard shot to where the deer can't go anymore. So he's got him pinched down, and that's worked out. I mean, dude, if anybody's listening to this, go to DO3 Outdoors and watch his kayak hunts. He kayaks out some slammers with this strategy.
And it always seems that all the big deer are around creeks or rivers. I don't know what it is, but like those hard accessible places that are on water, for some reason, I find all of the biggest deer that I chase on public land is in those areas, to be honest with you. Like, I don't know why. I don't know what it is. Like, it's just like that safe haven for them, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah. I think there's a couple, obviously there's, they can sit up on one side, they can smell from the other. If they need to turn around, deer have no problem running through water. I mean, they swim the Mississippi from, I live 10 miles from the Mississippi River. We do a lot of catfishing on it. They will go back and forth from Missouri to Illinois and Illinois to Missouri. We see them swimming the river while we're out on our catfish boat. So they have no problem just turning around and running away from danger through water. There's a lot of biodiversity there. And then, one of my big things I've talked about over the years is I'm a huge edge hunter. I hunt a lot of edges. I think those rivers naturally create that edge. So you got it all there.
So with the edges, they're walking those edges is what you're saying, so that they're not having to worry?
Yeah, so my thought process, and I've got some articles and stuff on it. One of my concepts I love to hunt is an edge within an edge. I'm looking for, obviously you've got the edge of like a green bean field, and then you go into CRP or whatever. But then you may have a lot of, you may have super thick briars for 150 yards, and all of a sudden it opens up from that into more of an area that maybe got hit by lightning and a fire went through there or something. All of a sudden, now you went from one edge into a deeper, and now you've got an edge of, or maybe box elders into maples or whatever. So there will be an edge within an edge, and that's where I love to sit because, man, it seems like those deer they're edge creatures. They love to follow that edge. And to answer your question, because I know that's my strategy, and then my philosophy or my thought process is they can kind of come out and feed into the more open area of that edge because there's more sunlight's coming through, there's more greenery growing up, there's more food source available, but 2 bounds and they're back into the super thick, heavy cover. So I think that's what a lot has to do with that edge within an edge, why it's so good.
Stevie, don't you you're an edge on an edge kind of guy too?
Big time too, especially in the rut. I love hunting that downwind edge of that thick stuff because I catch a lot of bucks cruising that edge because they can scent check everything in the thick. And like you said, the cover's right there, a couple bounds and they're gone. But, and a lot of times, we have a prevailing northwest wind. 9 times out of 10, all that rut sign I find is on that southwest side of that thick stuff because that's just where the bucks tend to be cruising most of the time when the sign's being laid.
Same. Yep. Agreed.
I had one quick question with this bounce around tactic that you have. What percentage are you going in, quote unquote, blind to, just picking a tree as you go? And how often are you going to, a predetermined tree that you found while scouting, or maybe even pre-prepped, or you had, hung in it years prior, or maybe hung in it preseason? Or are you going to a lot of trees that you're just finding as you go in?
That's a great question, Steve. You know what? I'd honestly say it's probably about a 75-25 mix. 75% of the time I'm going in blind. I'm going up a tree I've never laid eyes on before. In fact, my son is probably more like 95.5. My son, if once he gets to be a killer with a bow, like he's got ice in his vein, that's another thing that probably, I would have more big bucks on the wall if I didn't shoot 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 does a year, because we haven't bought red meat at a grocery store in 27 years either. So I put a lot of does down. And so that helps for a lot of reasons. It puts meat on the table. I don't have a grocery bill with red meat, all that stuff. But the main thing it does is I literally, when the moment of truth arises, it's just like shooting a big buck to me. And I've shot a bunch, right? Or not, I won't say a bunch. I've shot several. And so I'm very fortunate the fact that so far, maybe one of these days it'll happen, and I'm not going to say it won't ever, but so far I don't really suffer too much from buck fever. And I attribute a lot of that to, I shoot a lot of does. My youngest son needs to do that too, and he wouldn't miss that 174 at 17 yards broadside or whatever it was. But when he gets that ability, when he becomes that person, he's going to be a way better hunter than I ever was and ever. And we all want that for our sons, right? He's already a better hunter than I am. I'm a better killer than he is. He's a better hunter than I am. And he's probably a 95.5, 95% of the time. I mean, it may even be a higher ratio. That's no exaggeration. It might be higher. 95% of the time, he's crawling up in a tree that he's never been in before. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's a better hunter than I am. He will go out and scout and scout. One night I was worried. We were hunting out of a parking lot. I went right, he went left. And it was way dark. And this was 2 years ago or last year. No, it was 2 years ago. He was 14 years old. And he was in a national forest. And I was Daddy was getting really worried back. I mean, I was getting to the point where I thought I was going to have to start blowing on the horn every once in a while to, give him some kind of a honing beacon or something like that. And he finally came in. He goes, I didn't find any sign I wanted to sit up on. He had just walked and walked and walked and walked. And he ended up, he finally, because we share on X, he usually will drop me a pin. That night, he had no cell phone service, and he couldn't get on X to work. He only found his way back because we keep a free version of Hunt Stand on, and Hunt Stand actually did work that night. So he got a little bit of a signal from Hunt Stand, our free version. That's how he found his way back to the car in the dark. But he just goes until he finds an area he wants to sit up on, and then he sets up. So that's kind of our mentality.
I really like that mentality, honestly, and just going into a spot and looking for that sign and hunting the sign, because now you're not getting yourself caught up in any type of the other things that come along with hunting and looking for that sign. Now, one of the questions that I have, and it's something that I do, and it might be a figment of my imagination, whatever the case may be, but when I'm mobile hunting, one of the negatives that I have is if I'm looking for that sign and I walk past that sign thinking that I can find better sign.
Yeah. I have a story, man. I had a 150 class buck coming in. This has been 10 years ago. I have a philosophy now. I will never backtrack. ever. And
Okay.
that is a hard and fast rule of mine. Hard and fast rule because of what you just said. I learned it twice. It hurt me bad on a 150 class buck. The second instance was a big trophy doe. So not a big deal, but I would still love to put her in the freezer. But the 150 class, I'd walked up and didn't find a tree. I liked the area, but I didn't find a tree I liked. And I retreated back about 50 yards to find a tree I liked. That 50 yards, he hit my ground scent, turned inside out. I didn't even get a chance to draw the bow back. I mean, he was gone. And he was a nice buck. So and I had a big doe do that too.
So you literally just answered the question without finishing the question, because like I get nervous in going, like if I find sign, I will keep walking, but I'll tell in my mind I have to find better sign for me to set up, because I can't go back, because if I go back I'm screwed.
Yes. You are. And here's something people don't think about. Simple. I hunt with binos every time. I mean, I never go to the woods without binos, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I got a lot of people. I hunt with 10x42s, which is a pretty powerful bino in the Midwest in thickets. I mean, because we hunt some thick stuff like that. But it helps me. Sometimes I will see an antler or something like that coming through, weaving through brush, and I'll try to identify, do I want to shoot that deer or not? Because a lot of these states will get one tag. And man, I've been guilty of dropping the hammer and just murdering a deer that you can't take back. And like, crap, I didn't want to shoot that one, right? There's my whole year, my tag's gone. And so I'll try to use my binos to identify before we get there, is that a shooter? After I shot two, I'll follow a blood trail for 50, 60 yards from my tree before I ever get down with my binos. So I'm searching, I'm looking that arrow over, I'm looking the blood sign before I ever get down. But the key thing you just said there, Trevor, when I start getting a really good area, I'm like, okay, I want to hunt here. I will take those binos before I ever get, and I will look ahead 30, 40, 50 yards. I'll pick out a tree 40, 50 yards ahead. I'm like, okay, there's the tree I can get up in. And I'll make a beeline for that tree, or figure out how I can get to it, minimize the ground scent as much as I can. But I'll do that a lot.
Now,
that's a great tip.
That's a super great tip.
That's a great tip.
Yeah, because and this, I'm glad that I asked this, because there's a lot of times when I'm in another state hunting and mobile hunting from the ground, or mobile hunting, and I'm walking in the ground, and I get somewhere and I'll find the sign that I want, and then I'm like, or not find the sign I want. It's a halfway decent sign. I probably should set up on it, but I say, you know what? I'm gonna find better sign, and then I don't find that better sign. Then the point is, I really, honestly, I just walk right out of the woods. I don't even hunt. Like I literally will not even hunt, because I don't want to get back on that sign and then hunt, and then it end up kicking me in the ass in the long run. So I will honestly not hunt that night. Or I'll use it as a scouting mission, and then maybe come back at the end of the week after a rain or whatever the case may be.
Yep.
But I'm glad that and I've never talked about it with anybody, and you had brought it up, so I was like, and a lot of the things is like, you're not going to have that conversation with your buddy, so like, I was like, you know what, let's have this conversation, because I think it's a good conversation to have.
It bit me in the butt, man. I would give anything to have that deer on the wall. It was a beautiful deer, and just, he just turned inside out. Looked like he got hit in the nose with a sledgehammer, it's like gone.
So along with this, what are you doing as scent control for yourself while you're doing the mobile hunting? Do you do anything at all, or what do you just play the wind, or how do you go about it?
Yeah, I'm 100% play the wind. I mean, I carry a big, huge pocket of milkweed, and I'm floating them from the car. I'm floating them as I'm walking in. I'm floating them at the base of the tree. I'm floating them after I set up. Make sure it's doing the same thing up there that it was doing in the tree. I've come to this mindset, this philosophy, whatever, after years and years and years of believing that I could minimize my scent, right? I mean, I never was the scent block, charcoal activated dude, although I had some. So there's two stories I'll tell you real quick. I don't want to eat up too much of our time. I'm sure you got other things, but one is when I was really hooked up well with Bowtech, right? I mean, there was like 5 of us in a country that were like top tier. We were doing marketing, we were setting up dealerships, we were doing all this stuff for them, and we had some really good co-op deals with other companies in the industry. And Scent Blocker at the time is no longer around. Scent Blocker was one of those that gave us live Scent Blocker. And he came out to hunt with me during the rut one year. I mean, head to toe Scent Blocker. All the silver lining, all the stuff. He had activated. He didn't wear it. It was in a tub. I mean, he did it as perfectly as they see him. He was hunting the left side of the, and I had a deer come on my side of the water, and the wind was blowing from him to me. And that it was a young half-year hunter, probably a class. He had great. He's not a shooter. I didn't even pick up my bow. He's walking right in front of me about 10 yards, and he hit that guy's, my buddy's scent stream. That's one from me to him. And literally, he was just crunch, 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 crunch. I mean, you can hear that deer coming from 150 yards away. Crunch, 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 crunch. And he stopped. And he looked straight at my buddy. He couldn't see him because my buddy was 100 yards away across the slough. And he walked off, and I swear, Trevor, that deer walked off. I didn't hear him take another step. He didn't blow. He didn't do anything. He just went from crunch, 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 and literally tiptoed. He didn't, I don't know how he did it. He didn't look like he's walking any different. Never made another.
That's insane.
He's literally a quarter of an inch tall after they cut him and harvest them. And it had been raining for a week. I parked across a bean field, got out of my car, walked across this cut bean field. There was nothing to leave scent on hardly. I walked through puddles, around. I get up. Back in those days, I was hunting out of a lone wolf hand climber. I climb up. I can see this whole field. I can see my Jeep at the far end of the field. And I'm kind of hunting this edge and everything, and there's the woods behind me. And suddenly there's this little black dot that appears on the horizon. And like I mentioned, I'm always got my binos. I throw up my binos on it. I'm watching this black dot get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm watching that black dot follow step for step through the water, around the water, through the water. It's the farmer's black lab. And that black lab trailed me step for step all the way to the base of the tree, looks up at me and just starts panting. Going, and I'm like, and I had rubber boots on. I had sprayed them with scent blocker or scent killer or gold, whatever Lee and Tiffany were pushing at the time, right? And I'm like, screw this. There is no way to beat an animal's nose. And so those are my two examples. I've seen how they respond to activated charcoal. I've seen them respond to rubber boots through water and no foliage on the ground ever. And that lab trailed me step for step to my tree.
And that's the thing. How many stories do you hear about guys that have their dog follow them into the woods or cats? You hear all these crazy stories, and you don't think that those house animals that smell that stuff all the time, that if they can find you, how about the animals that have never smelt humans before or in that area at that time? Do you think they could do exactly the same exact thing? Like, there's no way. There's no way. It's absolutely, I don't know. You try the ozonics, you try this, you try that. It just, I don't know. The wind is your best friend.
I gave up on all of it.
Greg, I have a question for you along those lines. So what do you do in a situation where, I don't know, say you go in blind, you're hunting the downwind side of bedding. You get in there, you checked all your apps, you know what the wind's predicted to do. Maybe you read the terrain, you got a good idea what the thermal should do. You check your milkweed, everything's good. You get up in a tree, hour before sunset, the wind's doing the complete opposite. It's blowing into the bedding. What are you doing? Are you staying in the tree?
If it's blowing into the bedding, I'm leaving. I'm getting down.
Are you moving to another tree to ride it out, or are you just going back to the truck?
Most of the time, Steve, I went back to the truck. I mean,
okay.
Yeah, I have because a lot of times the areas that I'm going into just seem like there's if I could get around, maybe I've lost all my confidence at that point, and a lot of times I'm just like throwing in the towel, and maybe that's when I talk about all this grinding mentality and everything, maybe that's against it. Maybe I'm not doing the right thing when if I'm that kind of person, but a lot of times I do. I've lost my confidence for the night. I'm gone. Because I'd rather get out of there and not blow it if I can. But a lot of times though, we don't have a lot of wind switches. I mean, that's rare. So, but I've done that. I've got down and got out of there. But a lot of times our wind stays fairly steady. And that brings up another point. I take the buck I killed with 45 minutes left. I try to hunt on it. I learned this from Troy Pottinger. A lot of people know who Troy is now. Troy and I came up through some of the hunting forums and internet forums together back when we were young, 30 years ago or so. So back then, people didn't know who he was, but I knew he was a killer back then. And he had this philosophy of a just off wind, where the deer think they're safe, and they're not quite. And that buck I killed January 17th of last year with 45 minutes left, he was on a just off. Man, if that wind had shifted a degree or two, I would have been busted. And that deer came out about probably 20 yards away from my scent stream, straight into the wind. But it was blowing just like that. That deer came out. I mean, it was the very definition of a just off wind hunt. So I try to do that a lot.
So you're trying to keep that wind where it's good for you and good for him.
Yeah, because there's a lot of thought out there that, I mean, it'll happen. Deer are unpredictable, right? Sometimes they'll just walk, they'll walk straight with the wind, over their back, and they're coming in upwind of you. And I mean, it happens, right? They're animals. You can't explain them. But for the most part, I think mature bucks aren't going to move too much, especially out of their bedding area, right? Now, once they get out there and they're chasing hot does or whatever, that's a whole different ballgame. They're willy-nilly going everywhere, right? Or they're cruising from one thicket to another thicket or whatever. That's kind of off the table. But when they're getting up out of their bedding area where they've been sitting all day, I really think they like to move with the wind in their face, at least to come out of their bedding area. Then all, because a lot of times, by the time they get out of their bedding area to the point where you can see them, it's almost dark.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way that buck I killed last night was. It was last year. I mean, another, 15, 20 minutes, and you wouldn't have seen that deer.
And okay, now speaking of winds, what happens if you're hunting an area and say, the wind ends up, the wind's going to change halfway through your sit? Are you getting down and trying to move on to a different wind because that the bucks are going to end up getting up to change their bed from one bed to the other bed?
Absolutely. Either that or not planning on not coming in until you're aware that wind switch is going to happen. Almost like going into a hill country right as the thermals are about to switch, right? So you get set up just as the thermals are switching and starting to fall is the best time. There's no use to go in there and blow it all out before the thermals fall. And
right.
So, say if the wind's going to switch like that, that's the time to get in there.
Because then they're moving from, say it's a northwest to a southeast. Now they're going to move their bed from one area to the next area. So you want to be there so then they're on their feet and moving.
Yep.
And it's mobile hunting is the only way you're not going to be able to do that with a ladder stand. You got to be mobile hunting. You got to be mobile hunting.
You got to be mobile. And that reminds me of a story a couple years ago. I was at the Iowa Deer Expo. It might have been the same year that you and I were there together at the Iowa Expo. And that dude, and you might be able to confirm if this is true, it was the year that guy, I think he was from Virginia or something, but he went into, I think it was Illinois, and killed like the number 2 all-time buck ever. And he was a humble young kid. He wasn't braggadocious. He wasn't arrogant. I went up and talked to him. He was an awesome kid. And he said, hey, look, the only reason I killed this deer was I went into a deer camp, and all these guys, I was the last man, low man on the totem pole. And the last guy in camp, and all these guys had their predominantly prime spots set up that they hunted day in and day out. They had ladder stands, they had this, and they told that kid, they kicked him off to the back 30 or whatever, and said, "You go hunt over there." And because they had their prime spots, and that kid killed that big deer that had on camera, but they never could see him from the stand because that deer had every one of them pegged and patterned. And It was an awesome story. That deer was like 245. I mean, he was somewhere approaching 300s. I mean, it was a monster deer. I wish I could remember the kid's name because he's like the number 2 deer ever in Illinois or something.
What was the name of that deer's name? Zeus or Moses or something? It had some weird name. I know exactly what deer that you ended up talking about. He was there at the Grim Reaper booth, I think, is where he was with that deer. Yeah. Yeah. I forget the name of that deer. I'm such an idiot. I should remember it, but yeah.
I don't know. But the kid was awesome. Like, didn't have a prideful bone in his body.
No.
He just talked to you. he was a great guy. I love talking to him.
Ex-military kid, I remember.
Yep.
Kyle or something, I think his name was, or
I
something.
think it might have been Kyle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do remember that, but that's exactly what it is. There's so many stories, like guys that will go like, this is my stand, don't go near my stand, don't go near my stand. And then there's one here, a kid here in Connecticut, guy says, I'm going to put you on this property because I'm hunting a big buck on this property, right? And he's like, I don't want you hunting here because this is where my big deer is. Well, guess what? He was a mile and a half down the road, and he shot that deer. It was 190 inches. He ended up shooting it because he had kicked him off the property, and he couldn't go.
I love it. I mean, how many over the decades and years that we've been listening and watching and studying deer hunting, how many times that happened where a young kid goes in and kills at the first set because no one else, he wasn't allowed to hit the good spots, right?
Yeah, it's the same as that one nanny doe, and you know what I'm talking about. That comes in and looks up in those ladder stands, and I bet you see it a ton on public land. I know I have. And you have this one nanny doe that comes in, and she goes in, she looks up in that one tree stand, or she blows automatically, and nobody's even in that tree stand, and blows in that one tree stand. I had one nanny doe that did that. I set back 25 yards off that stand, and I shot that doe because I was sick and tired of her going in there and blowing at this stupid ladder stand that nobody was even sitting in because she had blown at it so many times thinking somebody was in it. You know, it's just, that's the great things about mobile hunting.
I talk about I don't like to get married to a tree. I don't like to get married to. Well, about 3 or 4 years ago, I shot that big buck. He would have been 171 if he hadn't broken his brow. If it had a matching brow, he snapped it off right at the base. It had been 171. He ended up, he was 164 because it was a 7-inch brow. But I killed that buck out of the tree. It's just, generic. We call it freak. He called him a freak nasty buck. And because he was just, drop tines and just junk everywhere. And so we refer to the tree as the freak nasty tree. And it sets up, it's just a beautiful setup. Overlook kind of a CRP field, down a fence row, coming from the left. And after I shot that buck, I got married to that tree a little bit. And dude, this doe would come out, and the first thing she'd do is she would just look up at that tree. Because I ended up, after I shot the freak nasty buck, I killed like 6 does out of that tree. Because they came out, they fed right in front of me. And after so much death, it's like this doe, she's probably a fawn when all this is happening. And she just learned, don't go to that tree, you die. And so dude, she would come out and she'd do the same thing. She'd just come out and she would just stare at that tree. And I moved on down the fence row about 45 or 50 yards. I didn't have a shot at her, but I could just watch her come out and just look at that tree. And I'm like, that reconfirmed again my thought process of don't get married to a tree.
I like it. I'm going to definitely use it. No question asked, because it makes so much sense. You get so sucked into going to that one tree. It's funny. After I killed my big buck in Ohio, the next year I went back and hunted in the same tree that I killed the deer in because I knew that I was like, oh, that's good bedding. It's a real good spot. There's a ton of deer there. And then come to find out, like, it just, you just can't do it. It's not a good idea as a mobile hunter. It really isn't. Right. You can make yourself successful any other way. But Greg, I know we wanted to get into a ton more things, but we're coming to the end. I have one more question. We're definitely going to have to do another podcast, at least on trapping and maybe some blue cats or something once this comes in.
Now you're talking my language, buddy.
Yeah, I know. We started talking whitetails, and we got so excited with the season coming and everything, and we had all this good topic and conversation, but we'll have to invite you back. We'll talk about doing some trapping and some blue catting and everything else, I know. But I do have one last question before we let you go, Greg. And we ask everybody this, but we want to know what drives you outdoors, Greg.
Dude, you know what? I was extremely blessed to be raised by a father who was very passionate about the outdoors himself, and he instilled that in me by just a lot of us just want to be like our dad, right? When we grow up, we see that man. He's just our hero. And I remember my dad took me frogging. If you guys are on the East Coast, I don't know if you guys go frogging or not. We float a little John boat down a ditch like a creek or something, right? They're man-made in the Midwest. And so, but we had a car battery and a 1,000,000 candlelight Q-beam spotlight, and we're gigging frogs down the side of the ditch. He took me when I was about 7 years old, and we actually had to get out. I got so sick that night, we had to get out at a spot that was close to home and walk about 1.5 miles to the house because the takeoff point got farther and farther and farther from the house. And he was so scared that he had ruined. Mom always says this. He goes, I think I ruined him. I don't think he's going to want to go outdoors with me anymore. And dude, I just fell in love with it at that point. And ever since then, I mean, rabbit hunting. Our problem is you mentioned trapping, chasing blue cat, trophy blue cats, frogging, shed hunting, turkey hunting. Dude, our problem is we're consumed with all of it. Mm-hmm. And so just, I mean, I don't want to give any of it up. And so I love it all. We're just so passionate about it. And man, if I could get in the industry but not have to work in the industry because I don't want to have to give up my hunting time, you know, that's a good thing. Dude, I don't know. I guess it was just the love that Dad instilled in it, man. It took 1,000%. That's the only. I don't know. Those of us that are that passionate about it, like I am, and you are, and Steve is. I don't know if we can explain it, man. It's just it's part of us. It really is.
I think it's the best explanation. 100% the best explanation. We've asked this in 205 episodes, and I think we actually found the answer, because that's what it is, because it's just instilled in you. It's the things that you were brought into. It's you're just so passionate about it. And when you talk about it, all the things that we do, like, I don't ever want to find another thing to do in the outdoors, because I could not find the time.
Yeah, because I see I follow you on Facebook too and Instagram, so you're the same way. You're chasing big, huge fish, and then you're chasing a duck, or you're going trapping or whatever. It's like, dude, I cannot do anything else. I am maxed out.
Yes. Yeah. It's so great. Greg, before we wrap up, man, can you just tell everyone where they can find you? You have an amazing YouTube channel and stuff. I want guys to go and check it out, and I will make sure to put the link below when I post this up. But if you just want to share with guys where they can find you, websites, magazines, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, we actually do have a website, because we sit like the shirt and hats and stuff like that. We sell a little bit of merch, not much. It's more for a spot that I had a whole book, because I've written for years and years and years for outdoor magazines. I just wanted to have a repository for that. So we have a website called stagsinthewild.com. And then that's our YouTube channel is Staggs in the Wild. Mm-hmm. Those are the two places. And there's a link to my YouTube channel on the website. But the YouTube channel is Staggs in the Wild. We do a lot. We do trapping. We haven't done a lot of fishing on the YouTube channel because I don't want to give away spots.
Yeah,
right?
That's the problem.
It's hard to film. It's hard to film on a major river like the Mississippi River. It's hard to film catching a 60-pound blue cat and not give away a grain bin in the back or something, you know. And so, so we don't film fishing yet, but we film a lot of trapping and a lot of mobile hunting and stuff like that. So yeah, check it out. Hopefully you'll like it.
Yeah, and Greg, once the season starts to kick in, before we get to trapping season, definitely have you come on. We'll do a trapping episode. I know we had talked about it in the past, but I think we need to do a good trapping one. We don't, I'm a big time trapper just like yourself, but we just don't talk about it. It's not like once trapping comes, we're just trapping, like we don't give out our tips and tricks. We just trap, So I think we should do a good trapping series when this comes around.
I think so, and I think we can educate a lot of people. A lot of people hear trapping and their mind instantly shuts off. Mm-hmm. They're like, trapping, God, I can't believe these guys trap, and they don't realize the wildlife-based science behind it, right? Mm-hmm. The wildlife management that goes behind it. The fact that we're not, traps just hold, they don't hurt. We can choose to release animals if we want to, depending on how what we want to do, our conservation goals are. And so I think we can do a lot of education in a trapping episode too.
And people don't really, one of the things with trapping, that I look at it as, it's a heritage. It's something that where everything had started. It's been here for so long. The controlling of animals, like you said, the conservation aspect of it, the things for, ground nesting birds and this, they're predators, so you have to, there's a checks and balances in it. We can definitely, I think we'll have a great trapping episode down the road. I think it'll be a really good thing. Greg, I cannot thank you enough for jumping on, man. We're so looking forward to watching the season of you and your boy hunting this year and everything you guys got going on, and I don't think it'll be the last time that they hear Greg here on the Outdoor Drive.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Absolutely. And for everyone else, make sure you go and you check out Greg, and thanks for taking the ride right here on the Outdoor Drive.